Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are here for the second match of the Friday stream here at the Victory Road World Cup of VGC, sponsored, of course, by Elgato. My name is Ben Kiraku. I'm joined here by Stefan and Mott here today. And we've got a really exciting game with quite a lot on the line, Stefan. You mentioned it earlier in the game. But before we move on to that, I just want to touch base on one of the Pokemon that I really enjoyed watching from the last match and something that's gained a lot of prevalence in this format so far, and that's that Gyarados, because it was crucial to that matchup.
I also just really liked the way that Brian decided, Gyarados is really good into this Groudon matchup, but the way he didn't play it the way we normally see, right? I mean, I talked about it a little bit, that Assault Vest is very kind of like omnipresent on Gyarados
Yeah,
these days.
yeah,
So
yeah.
running it with Taunt was just such a cool switch up, just completely destroying Nathan's game plan in game number one. And, on top of that, being a Gyarados into a Groudon team is just never going to be bad. You don't really need that Assault Vest for that matchup. So really, really cool decisions there by Brian.
Yeah, definitely. And I like the way that he prepared for the matchup. Obviously, his opponent using the same team that he did last week. And so, there's that little bit of tweaking the Pokemon that you bring in formats such as these or tournaments such as these where you play, week by week, and you can get a little bit of information on your opponent and see what you need to prepare for going into the match. But of course, we have another match for you today. This match is between Singapore and Indonesia. We've just had a little bit of a sneak preview at the teams that are going to be here, but really excited to see those. But in the meantime, no scores on the door between Singapore and Indonesia so far this week.
Yeah, and this is a super, super important match as well. Singapore sitting on 4 points, Indonesia sitting on 3 points. The winner of this match advances. However, Singapore with that slight advantage will advance if they can pull out just a 4-4 draw. So every single match is super pivotal in this week for these two. Indonesia, generally, I would say, considered a bit of an underdog against Singapore, but they're coming off the back of an 8-0 win against Panama. So they've got to be feeling very good coming into this match.
There's so much to be said about the positive momentum that a team win, especially 8-0. I mean, we've only seen a few of them in the tournament so far, and you just got to be feeling good after that, and especially when you're going into these sort of pivotal matches where if you get a draw, then you don't go through. So you have to win. You have to win those crucial 5 matches. You want to be going into that feeling as good as possible. So yeah, we'll have to see how these players interact. We haven't, as we said, we haven't seen any matches yet so far. So we'll have to see whether or not these two teams will be able to get that first all-important win chalked up on the board and put their team in a great position for some more matches either tonight or over the weekend.
Yeah, now we're going to go in and have a little bit of a look at the teams that our two players are bringing, and of course, a bit of a look at their histories as far as accomplishments go. Carilynne is going to be bringing, we were talking about this a little bit during the break, a really cool-looking Lunala team.
Yes, so cool. I mean, like Lunala on its own is one of those Pokemon that's sort of like a little bit underused, maybe a little bit better than what the amount of usage that it gets. But more importantly, the supporting cast. I see Jellicent here, which I don't remember seeing too much of in VGC since way back in like 2013, maybe a little bit 2015. So seeing it come back here is quite crucial. And of course, it's one of those Pokemon with such an interesting typing. It can do so many things with its ability to have speed control, its water spout for offensive potential. So, the world is your oyster almost in how you train these sort of this sort of Pokemon. And of course, a little bit Grimmsnarl seeing popularity in previous series, not so popular at the moment. And for Orthorn, equally so we see a little bit less usage of that. So and Heatran, of course, as well. Keep going forward. There's more Pokemon that we haven't seen too many times here before. Carilynne doesn't have too many achievements, unfortunately, for us to showcase. But her score at the moment is 1-1 so far. So won a game, lost a game, looking to win the next game for her team, Singapore.
Yeah, so looking over at her opponent now, one thing that jumps out to me immediately from Andy is that he's not running a Calyrex Shadow Rider, which is kind of the main worry that I had when I first saw that Lunala team. Looking like a pretty standard Zacian team. That is the Urshifu single strike sprite, but of course that is the default one, so we don't really know which one that's going to be. If it is single strike, all of a sudden this matchup becomes a lot better for Andy. But if it's the more standard rapid strike one, this is going to be a little tough.
Very tough indeed. And, single strike Urshifu would match up so well into Lunala and so well into Jellicent. Of course, good matchups against Ferrothorn and Heatran as well. So you've got a kind of one-man answer to pretty much everything on Carilynne's team. And that's going to be one of the difficulties here. If it is that rapid strike, though, this becomes a really tough matchup for Andy. That Jellicent could have Water Absorb, which would make it immune to Urshifu completely. So maybe it doesn't even come to the match, and Andy has to leverage all of the other Pokemon. Of course, with this kind of Zacian build, there will be some things that depend on, whether there's a safety goggles on Carilynne's team for that Amoonguss support. Of course, whether the Zacian can go for a substitute on Trick Room, and whether or not the Incineroar can be trained to survive something like a Meteor Beam from the Lunala as well. All things that could make a big difference in this matchup, and really will depend on how Andy has trained his Pokemon.
Camera.
Yeah, looking at this matchup, I think on Andy's side, the two most pivotal Pokemon, provided that that's a Rapid Strike Urshifu, are going to be the Landorus and that Amoonguss. And, one of the things with Amoonguss is that you always have to kind of wonder which of the opposing Pokemon is holding the safety goggles. And we were discussing that a little bit in the break. In the meantime, like, it could be the Grimmsnarl, which would be a little weird, but it could be the Heatran, but again, that'd be a little weird. And it could be the Jellicent, but again, that'd be a little weird. So it might not be on any of them, but it realistically could be on all of them, because there isn't really an obvious safety goggles user on this team. So that's going to be some very, very important information for Andy to try to suss out in this first game.
Definitely. And, it is, when you look at these sort of team compositions, Zacian only really has a way to lower the speed on its opponent's team, rather than a way to control it any other way. And of course, Carilynne has Trick Room available to her. And so, the name of the game here is really whether Carilynne gets the Trick Room up and can take advantage of it fully. Depending on where that safety goggles is will depend on how that goes with the Amoonguss on the field. And of course, also when the Trick Room goes off, you could see maybe a little bit of an early game where the Pokemon on Carilynne's side of the field are really quite bulky. And so you get into these situations where you play around, you trade a little bit, you do some damage, and then Trick Room goes off, and now the game's over effectively for Andy. So there's going to have to be a lot of pivoting around there, and Andy's going to have to be very careful, when he takes knockouts, when he attacks, when he doesn't, how much damage he's going to be taking, because you've always got to be, when you're in Andy's position, worried about whether or not you can get through Trick Room, unless he has some other means like Taunt on the Incineroar to stop it going up in the first place.
We do have the game ready. We're going to be jumping right into game one here, and it's going to be a real spicy one if the teams are anything to go by. And I'm interested to see what the leads are going to be here, because I feel like there's a lot of different options that could be on the table here for Carilynne. She has a lot of different ways that she could play this. We've talked about the Trick Room, but if she's running sort of middling speed on these Pokemon, something like that Thunder Wave on Grimmsnarl could be really annoying as well. But it's going to be the Lando Jellicent lead, and the Landorus is already threatening this Zacian Eleki lead pretty heavily.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be staring that down if you're the Regieleki, certainly. But one of the nice things here is that Andy's got the Regieleki on the field while Carilynne has the Landorus on the field. And so you know that you can freely go for those electric attacks into Jellicent, and maybe a combination of Thunderbolt and a Behemoth Blade from this Zacian and Regieleki could be enough to knock out the Jellicent. If that's the case, then maybe you can stop Trick Room this turn, but then you're probably losing the Zacian at this point, and once you've lost the Zacian, then you're losing all of your ways to damage that Lunala. So it's a really delicate turn here as to both players as to what Pokemon they protect. And speaking of protect, that's exactly what the Zacian does. And of course, which Pokemon attack.
Volt Switch should not be enough to take out the Jellicent here, so it's going to be a free Trick Room on turn number 1. And what's going to be coming on into this? If it's an Amoonguss, that could make things a little bit awkward here for Carilynne. And it is going to be that Amoonguss, so we'll see just how much damage the Landorus can apply here. We did see the Earth Power is not going into the Zacian. A good read on that Protect, and that does quite a bit of damage to that Amoonguss.
Yeah, Trick Room going up here. Good for kind of both players here. That Amoonguss, though, it's taken too much, really, realistically, for Andy to want to be really aggressive with his spores. Maybe has to now think about whether or not he goes for a spore, whether he's got access to Grass Knot that will probably be enough to dispatch the Jellicent. But of course, Zacian now having just protected is under threat from that Landorus. So you've got this sort of cycle going on. Do you spore the Landorus to stop the Earth Power? Do you predict the Landorus to go for a Protect to stop the spore and attack into the Amoonguss with the Jellicent and see if you can get a little bit of a knockout there? And if you're the Jellicent, are you carrying that safety goggles, and do you even have to worry about the Amoonguss at all? Maybe go for something else like a Will-O-Wisp into this Zacian.
Ferrothorn's going to be coming in on that left-hand side for the Landorus, which is going to be a very, very nice way to make that slot immune to Spore at the very least, as Eleki comes back in. Eleki, not really a Pokemon you want to be on the field, and the Spore does go into the Ferrothorn, so that's going to be a very, very nice turn here for Carilynne. Strength Sap's going to be able to dish out a little bit of a healing for this Jellicent. I don't think it'll take it all the way up to full, but does do pretty well there. And now, I mean, the Eleki switch-in was mostly just to get the Zacian off of the field, I feel like.
Yeah.
You don't really want that Pokemon to just be sitting here in a situation where it's very easily going to be the slowest thing in this entire game.
Definitely not. And, again, it comes down to what item this Regieleki is, whether it's got access to Protect or not, and we see some Regieleki do, some don't. Focus Sash in these sort of compositions could be the item of choice, but that also could be on the Urshifu, so a little bit of a toss-up here, but either way, it'll definitely take 2 Pokemon to attack the Regieleki to get the knockout.
Gyro Ball already dishing out so much damage, and the Goggles reveal coming in on the Jellicent side. That is going to be a very, very eliminated Regieleki here. Amoonguss tanks that pretty easily, but as we saw, the Ferrothorn is going to be slower than that, so a Gyro Ball into that slot will very easily pick up the Amoonguss. We'll have to see if it's running Protect. It's not really the most common move on Amoonguss. You can take it or leave it as an Amoonguss player. It has so many moves that you want to put on it. A lot of players just don't run Protect, so this could all of a sudden be that very awkward situation that you were talking about pregame, where Trick Room goes up and suddenly the game is over.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard for Andy to come back here. I mean, you've got 2 turns left of Trick Room on the board at the moment, and so that's going to be quite difficult. Andy's got to position 2 Pokemon in that do enough damage or can survive enough hits from Carilynne's side of the field. But with that Landorus switching in for Andy and Zacian in the back and already access to Water Spout, the Amoonguss is doing basically nothing. If you switch in the Zacian to a Water Spout Jellicent at, let's say, 2/3 of its health, still going to be taking a chunk, and of course Ferrothorn with that Gyro Ball, it's going to be doing a lot of damage as well. So a little bit of regenerator action coming out from that Amoonguss, and Zacian enters the field.
Yeah, this is going to be really, really tough. The Lando is almost definitely going to need to land a double Protect over this in the next turn. First one does come out, and we'll see if the Zacian is even capable of surviving this double up. I don't think it's going to, as Gyro Ball already dishes out 50%. Water Spout, it's not full HP, and it's not a Kyogre, so maybe it lives. Wow, that actually does significantly less than I would have expected.
Yeah, not in the rain or not having that huge special attacks. It's kind of one of those things. Zacian's trained to take Water Spouts from Kyogre, so it can take it from Jellicent, no worries. But the trouble is now that Landorus is just protected. Maybe it gets the double Protect, maybe Zacian protects again. But it's going to be so difficult for Andy to just mitigate all of the damage. Even with this Amoonguss coming in, it's still going to have to take a lot.
Yeah, the Protect comes out on the Zacian, which is of course going to be able to stall this turn of Trick Room. But Gyro Ball is really the main storyline here. I can't say that I expected it to be as efficient as it has, but Gyro Ball, it does damage based on how much slower you are than your opponent. Namungus is not exactly what we would call a speedy boy. So it's going to be able to take that double up pretty effectively.
It is, and that now we're at this point in the game where you can't switch anymore. Really, if you're Andy, one more turn of Trick Room left, and Carol is still in the driver's seat here. So really, down to those double protects, or do you sacrifice one of the Pokemon on your side of the field? You have to then choose whether that's Landorus or Zacian. But of course, we've still got one Pokemon in the back for Carilynne that we haven't seen, and if it's that. Trick Room had ended, and the Sacred Sword comes out from the Ferrothorn. Iron Barb's going to be doing a little bit of damage to the Zacian for its troubles, and a little bit of health recovery coming out here from the Amoonguss.
Yeah, Sacred Sword doing quite a lot of damage into that Ferrothorn, but the Gyro Ball is going to be able to take pretty much all of that Pollen Puff back. Trick Room comes back down once again. And once again, we're in this bit of an awkward spot where what exactly does Andy do? If there's an attacking move on that Amoonguss, it's probably going to be something like a Grass Knot, or, obviously Pollen Puff exists, but I don't know if Pollen Puff will pick up Ferrothorn from here. I feel like it probably would. So this becomes a bit of a 50-50 situation where it's like, do you read the Pollen Puff to try to maybe heal the Zacian, or do you read it into the Ferrothorn? Is there a Protect on the Zacian? There's a lot of different things that Andy can go for, and Carilynne is going to need to get this read right in order to keep the momentum in her favor as much as it has been this whole game.
And one of the things I wonder is whether at the health range we're here, whether the Jellicent just goes for something like a Will-O-Wisp into the Zacian and kind of shuts down the main form of damage rather than tries to out-damage the Pollen Puff, because at that point, then you don't really have to worry so much. But Protect coming out here from the Amoonguss and the Zacian, so no attacks, no Pollen Puffs, no nothing. Just a little bit of scouting out the targeting here, and that's going to be Ferrothorn going into the Amoonguss and the Water Spout going into the Amoonguss and the Zacian on Carolyn's end.
Yeah, Protect revealed on Amoonguss is actually a very, very big reveal in game number 1 of a best of 3. So Carilynne, knowing that she needs to play around that, is going to be a pretty big deal. Gyro Ball, once again, targeting into the Amoonguss. I'm not sure if that'll pick up. It looks to me like it's probably a roll. I can't tell if it's favorable or unfavorable, but we'll see what happens here. Jellicent just continues clicking on the Water Spout button, and the Zacian is going to be in a lot of trouble here. I feel like we need to see a Pollen Puff come out onto that Zacian and just Andy pray to all of the gods that Gyro Ball does not pick up.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's good targeting, but maybe you could target into the Zacian anyway. The Amoonguss is doing pretty much nothing. That Pollen Puff is not likely to do too much damage. Protect coming out there from the Amoonguss does fail, but the double Protect coming out onto that Zacian does manage to land. So Gyro Ball going into the Amoonguss, you are absolutely right, Stefan, doesn't pick up the KO. So unfortunate miss on the double Protect there. And Water Spout is going to be enough to pick it up, and now it's going to be a case of a little bit more damage coming out onto the field, and probably Landorus against the world. Unless it gets several Protects, it's going to have to be against the world in Trick Room.
Yeah, that's such an unfortunate missed opportunity there from Andy. I think Andy just really expected the switch up, because we did see Gyro Ball into the Amoonguss on the previous turn, and I think he just really thought, all right, it's going to go into the Zacian this time or something. But clicking Pollen Puff into that Zacian would have really changed the landscape of this game quite substantially. But as it stands now, there's not really much to do. We've already seen a double Protect come out of the Zacian, so it would be a tall order for it to land a triple, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we haven't seen too many triple Protects, certainly not on stream anyway. I think I've only got a handful of them over far too many years of playing Pokemon, and yeah, but it is the way out for Andy. He has to go for it. Protect coming out on the Landorus here, again, makes sense. It does have to keep going for Protects, and that triple Protect does unfortunately fail for Andy. Gyro Ball going into Protect on Landorus, not going to really matter too much at all. And that Water Spout, of course, going to be landing into the Zacian, and no chance that's going to be hanging on with a few health as it returns to Andy. And now it's just a case of Landorus versus the world. One Protect burn, one turn of Trick Room left, and of course, two Pokemon in the back for Carilynne.
Yeah, this is Landorus versus the world is never a situation you want to be in. Landorus is a good Pokemon. It's an extremely good Pokemon, but it's not very good at 1v2s, let alone 1v4s. The double protect's not going to land, so none of that's going to matter. Ferrothorn, that's something we don't see very often either. It used up all of the PP on Gyro Ball. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why you use PP maxes on your Pokemon before you take them into a tournament. I think there was only one PP left on Water Absorb as well. So, really a hard carry by the Ferrothorn Jellicent duo there, and a great game one for Carilynne.
Yeah, and there's going to have to be some real adjustments there from Andy's side of the field. He's going to have to go back to the drawing board, because that Amoonguss, which usually wants to be the Trick Room answer, doesn't want to be the Trick Room answer anymore when you're sitting in front of two Pokemon that you can't spore. And with that Protect there, you've got to assume that Rage Powder was one of the moves of choice for Andy's Amoonguss as well. So with Protect, Rage Powder, Spore, and Pollen Puff, you have no way to damage that Jellicent. I mean, in turn one, if the Trick Room went up and Grass Knot came out and that Jellicent was removed from the field, can you imagine how much of a different game that would have been? We wouldn't have seen all of those Water Spouts. The Landorus was maybe able to switch in and out a little bit more and do a little bit more work. So definitely back to the drawing board for Andy. And of course, Carilynne probably pretty content, especially given that she only revealed 3 out of 4 of her Pokemon, to go for a similar strategy, see how it is, feel up how Andy is going to reposition his board and adjust to what's just happened in game one as a pretty crushing defeat. And then, hey, if Andy does do well and manages to get through that Trick Room, manages to take game 2, then Carilynne will know exactly how to reposition herself for game 3. So I think it's all of the eggs are in Carolyn's basket at the moment, and it's just now for Andy to see how he's going to adjust. And speaking of adjustments, what is it you think, Stefan, that we could see from Andy to change things up?
Well, you mentioned information and the fact that we saw very little on Carilynne's side from the perspective of Andy. Not only did she only reveal 3 Pokemon, she only revealed 1 move on the Ferrothorn. She didn't reveal Wisp on the Jellicent. And we've seen a lot of very interesting stuff, or maybe not a lot, but things like the Protect coming out, the Pollen Puff coming out, moves that Amoonguss doesn't carry 100% of the time. So even from an information gathering perspective, Carilynne is way ahead. So going into that, I mean, the obvious switch up would be to bring the Urshifu if it is single strike, but I feel like we would have seen that already if it was. So it's going to be really, really tough. And I don't think the way to go is to try to play through Trick Room. I think the way to go is to try to deny Trick Room in the first place.
Yeah, and really, it's going to be a case of whether Andy actually has that within his arsenal. But we've got game 3 prepared here. We're going to be going straight into it. So let's see how these trainers have adapted. I'm looking forward to seeing how Andy is going to be leading against this really tough to beat Trick Room team here, and whether or not we're going to see something completely different from game 1. So here we are. Here's the leads. It's going to be the Regieleki and the Landorus, so a little bit of a switch up on one of the Pokemon, and of course Lunala and Landorus coming out from Carilynne, so a switch up there as well.
A great switch up, because we did see the Jellicent almost went down from a single hit on that turn 1 in the last game. Lunala is not going to go down to these 2 Pokemon, so this is going to be a very reliable first Trick Room unless something wild happens, like something like a double crit or something like that, or Regieleki uses Thunder and gets a full paralysis or something. But a very, very good lead once again for Carilynne. She knows exactly what she wants to do in this matchup, and so far it's working very, very well. We're going to have to see if Andy has some fancy trick up his sleeve, but this is already looking very unfortunate once again.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there with the double critical hit, is to be what you've got to go for here. Electro Web, though, coming out from that Regieleki. Not quite sure about that play because it lowers the speed on the Lunala. So if Trick Room does come out this turn, Lunala's going to be even faster than it would already be. And that Earth Power coming out from the Landorus, not even close to picking up the KO. Earth Power coming out from the Landorus is enough, definitely, to pick up the KO. Well, would have been if the sash wasn't on the Regieleki.
No, that was Psychic, Ben. It's running Psychic.
I didn't even. I just saw the move and it was like, Earth Power. Yeah, it must be Earth Power. It's on a Regieleki. Caroline predicting the switch there, maybe predicting the Amoongus to come in, and yeah, we saw how much damage the Earth Power would have done to the Amoongus on the switching before. It was like 75%. So you got to think a Psychic would pick it up.
And of course, Psychic, people think of Psychic as, 90 base power damaging move, but it does have a very small chance to lower the special defense, which matters on the Lando, because all of a sudden Sheer Force comes into effect. That thing is going to be doing a ton of damage if it hits. And, an Amoongus is definitely not going to be able to survive that. So, really, really cool tech. Meteor Beam is going to come out of the Lunala now. And, it's a little bit slower from that Electro Web. It's a bit like that meme, the Top Gear meme. It's like, oh no, anyway. So it's kind of nice, but we'll see if the Meteor Beam is able to pick up. I believe this was a double target, in fact, into the Landorus, but Meteor Beam's able to pick up with just a single hit, and that Regieleki is not long for this world either.
No, just another Psychic into there. Definitely seeing the moves that are coming out this turn, and Regieleki and Landorus going down this turn is, yes, tough. It's really tough, because you got to think that the Zacian is in the back as well. Maybe the Amoongus is, but we've already seen that the Amoongus doesn't really have too much to do here. But no, it is Incineroar that comes in. Good for that Lunala, and Zacian coming out here not so good in this position, because unfortunately you've got Landorus on the field, which is unlikely to be able to outspeed the Zacian in Trick Room. You've got Lunala there, which is just going for a Moongeist Beam, actually, straight off the bat here into that Zacian.
Yeah, that's a ton of damage as well coming on out. Behemoth Blade is going to be able to dish out a fair amount of damage in return going into that Landorus here. And that's going to be enough for a one-hit knockout, which is very nice in its own right. But overall, we'll have to see whether or not Zacian can carry the day. It's a little bit better at sort of Zacian versus the Worlding than the Landorus was in the last game, but with something like a Jellicent, we have Wisp potential, we have Strength Sap potential, and we have no way to reset those attack drops from Strength Sap.
No, indeed, and I believe that Incineroar and Jellicent could be trained to be the same speed, but Incineroar and these kind of archetypes with Zacian tend to run a little bit of speed, don't tend to run min speed, and so if that is the case, then this Jellicent's just going to be able to get a Water Spout off. We saw the amount of damage that Water Spout did to the Zacian as well in the last game. Likely with full health, it could pick up the knockout on Zacian, and Zacian's probably a bit worried about that as it goes for a Protect, and the Water Spout goes off first.
Yeah, this is going to dish out a ton of damage to that Incineroar. It does manage to survive, which is always nice. Gets that little bit of a berry boost as well. I don't really think the Lunala has any way to KO that. Of course, the Power Herb's already been taken up for the Meteor Beam. Moongeist Beam is going to be coming on in. With the +1, maybe this picks up, but I don't think so. We'll see. Maybe? It does survive, just barely. Throat Chop comes in, so all of a sudden, it's not into the Lunala though, and the Jellicent does survive.
Yeah, I like that targeting there by Andy. The Jellicent really is the threat here, but yeah, we're in the same place as last game, right? Carilynne's got Trick Room up, she's got all of the damage output on her side of the field. Andy's got no way to really stop it. He's now got no switching potential, and so Incineroar not being able to protect and on such low health. Water Spout, Moongeist Beam, take your pick. I mean, it's going to be definitely enough to pick up the knockout. And of course, even if the Water Spout doesn't pick up the KO on Zacian, the Moongeist Beam will, but we see yet another double protect coming out from that Zacian.
On the one hand, it's kind of easy to say, wow, Andy's so lucky. He keeps getting double protects. But then you remember that he's had to go for like 12 of them. So you're going to hit some of them here or there. And in this kind of a situation, I don't know how much that's really going to matter in the context of the game. This has been just an absolute clinic on how to dismantle one of the more standard Zacian teams by Carilynne. She's done such a fantastic job in this entire set. And I don't... some people like to say that Zacian is really broken, but I don't think it's quite broken enough to win from this position.
No, I don't think so. It's going to try its best, though. Going for that Behemoth Blade. Going to be enough to pick up the Lunala for sure. No worries about picking up that knockout, no Shadow Shield or anything else to get in the way of that KO. But Jellicent's just going to set the Trick Room up, and we did see previous turns when Carilynne was switching that there is that Ferrothorn in the back, and we saw how much damage that did to the Zacian in the previous game. pretty much able to pick up a one-hit knockout from there. And of course, Strength Sap can heal the Jellicent back up to full, while stopping the Zacian from doing more damage. We got the Wisp, and we could go for the Water Spout as well. But all of these things are leading towards a very convincing game 2 win here from Carilynne, taking the set 2-0 and taking the first win for Singapore.
I like the Andy is here for the memes. He wants to see. He's been saying to himself, I went for a triple protect in the last game. I just want to see if I get it. Maybe we see the fabled quadruple protect. Nope, not this time, as it's going to be game over for Andy Zacian. The gyro ball going in for Rawthorn, the MVP of this set. Maybe, Jellicent was so good too. This whole team, every single Pokemon that was brought by Carilynne pulled its weight. Really, really cool team, really well constructed, and a little bit scary into a potential Calyrex matchup, but that just to me shows that the preparation was good enough that they knew that there was not going to be a Calyrex shadow on the opposite side of the field.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of the great things about this sort of tournament. You're not playing like when you go to a live event or when you're playing an online tour where you have to play lots of different matches in a row. You have to compete against, maybe Calyrex Shadow, then maybe Zacian, then Groudon, and then maybe another Zacian, who knows. But with these tournaments, you just have to beat one player. So, you can be a little bit more flexible in your team building. You don't want to build in too many weaknesses, but, it looked like Carilynne just says like, okay, I think my opponent might be using Zacian. I'm just going to go and sit down and be like, okay, how do I get up Trick Room against Zacian, or how do I beat Zacian really reliably? And Jellicent was really that answer. And of course, with all of those techs to beat the things that usually Zacian gets paired with, and the most threatening of which being Amoonguss. So Safety Goggles comes onto the team, and then you start building from there. And a really good showcase of all of those bits of preparations, all of those team preparations that you go into before a match, paying off as like, oh yeah, that's why that team works, because I've built that to do exactly what it did in this match, and it's got me the win. So props to that. Props to Andy for giving it a go, trying for that triple protect as well. Got to give him the moral victory there for sure. But unfortunately, not enough to pick up a win.
Yeah, just a bit of an unfortunate matchup for Andy. He did go for the win conditions, but that's kind of how it is being a Pokemon player, right? If you see a win condition, no matter how small it is, you do kind of have to go for it just to see. At a stage like this, you're representing your country, a team, up to 12 people on each of these teams. You're representing a lot of people. You don't want to let people down, so you go for that win condition. This time, it didn't quite pan out. And big congratulations once again to Carilynne for an incredible match. Going forward, though, we have another really interesting one coming our way. It's going to be Spain versus Puerto Rico coming up right after a break.